I want to start with something kind of embarrassing. I picked that gym because of the blinds. Not the equipment, not the price. The blinds on the front windows were the kind that actually blocked the view from the sidewalk, and after driving past four other gyms with floor-to-ceiling glass like a fishbowl that mattered more to me than any treadmill ever could. I was 26 years old and terrified of being seen sweating. That's the whole confession right there. I wasn't scared of judgment about being gay, not really, not by then. I was scared of being watched while I was bad at something, different fears, same result. I avoided gyms for 6 years. Then my doctor used the word pre in front of diabetic, and I stopped being able to ignore it. So I signed up at this place called Ironclad, which is a stupid name for a gym that smelled like eucalyptus and rubber mats, and I picked the 8 p.m. slot because it was the emptiest hour on their little schedule chart. Fewer people, fewer eyes. I told myself that was the whole plan. The plan fell apart the first week because that's when I met Theo. He wasn't my assigned trainer. I didn't have an assigned trainer. I'd paid for the cheapest membership, the one where you're basically on your own with a laminated card of exercises nobody follows. Theo just happened to be closing up the free weights section on a Tuesday when I dropped a 20-pound dumbbell on my own foot and made a noise I am not proud of. He didn't laugh. That's the first thing I noticed. Most people would have at least smiled. He just jogged over, crouched down, and asked if I could wiggle my toes, all business like this was a normal Tuesday for him, which I guess it was. "You're gonna have a bruise," he said after I proved I still had feeling in my foot. "Ice it tonight." "Thanks, doc. I'm not a doctor." I know it was a joke. He looked at me for a second too long like he was deciding whether that was funny, and then he actually laughed, this short, surprised laugh like it got pulled out of him before he could stop it. And I remember thinking, okay, that's a nice laugh, filing that away, not doing anything with it, just filing it. I didn't sign up for training sessions. I want to be clear about that because in my head this story starts sounding like I had a plan and I didn't. I just kept ending up at the gym around the same time he was working, and he kept correcting my form without me asking, and after a month of that I finally said, half joking, "Are you just gonna coach me for free forever or should I pay you?" He said, "Depends, do you want the real program or the laminated card? Is there a difference?" "The laminated card is designed so people don't hurt themselves. My program's designed so people actually change." I signed the paperwork 2 days later. My friend Priya said I only did it because I thought he was hot, and I told her that was a gross oversimplification of a very complex financial decision, and she said, "Caleb," in that tone, and I said, "Okay, fine, yes, obviously," and we left it there. The sessions were Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30. He was patient in a way that didn't feel performative. He'd stop mid-set if my form drifted, put 2 fingers right below my ribs and say, "Breathe from here, not your shoulders," completely unbothered, like touching people to fix them was just part of the job description and nothing else. Which it was. I had to keep reminding myself of that. I found out things about him slowly, the way you do with someone you see twice a week but don't actually know. He grew up 3 towns over. He'd played college baseball until his shoulder gave out sophomore year. He had a niece he clearly adored because his ringtone was her singing "Happy Birthday" off-key, and he never once looked embarrassed when it went off mid-session. He drank his coffee black and thought that was a personality trait, which I told him it wasn't, and he told me my opinion didn't count because I put syrup in mine like a child, which fair. What I didn't find out for a long time was whether he was gay. I want to be honest about how much space that question took up in my head because it's a little humiliating in retrospect. I studied everything. The way he talked about his ex, vague, gender never specified, which could have meant anything or nothing. The way he'd occasionally catch me looking and not look away first, which could have been confidence or could have been nothing because trainers look at your body all day. That's the job, it doesn't mean what you want it to mean. 6 weeks in, I decided it didn't matter. I built a whole argument in my head about how this was a professional relationship and I was projecting and I needed to just show up, do my sets, and go home like a normal client. I was pretty proud of that argument. I stuck to it for almost 2 whole weeks. Then it snowed. Not gym closing snow, just enough to make the roads bad enough that my 7:30 Thursday session had exactly one other person in the building besides me and Theo, some woman finishing up on the treadmill who left around 7:45. By 8 it was just us. He mentioned, sort of offhand while spotting me on the bench, that the manager had texted saying he could close early since nobody else was coming in on a night like this. "You want to bail?" he asked. "I can reschedule you." "No, I'm already sweaty and sad, might as well finish." He laughed again, filed it away again. We finished around 8:20. He walked me to the door like he always did, this weird habit of his, making sure the last client got out okay, and I was zipping up my jacket when he said, kind of fast, like he'd been holding it in his mouth for a second before letting it out. "Hey, you're doing better than you think you are. The stuff you came in worried about, you should be proud of where you're at." I didn't know what to do with that. It landed somewhere I wasn't expecting, somewhere under the gym membership version of me, and I think my face did something weird because he looked a little alarmed and said, "Sorry, was that weird? I don't know why I said that like a fortune cookie." "No, it's thank you, actually, I needed that today kind of." "Rough day." "Rough year, Loki." I laughed it off. He didn't laugh with me, he just sort of nodded like he was actually taking it in instead of waiting for his turn to talk, and something about that made me want to keep going, so I did. I told him about the prediabetes thing, and how my dad had the real version and it scared me more than I usually admit out loud, and how half the reason I picked the 8 p.m. slot in the first place was that I didn't want anyone watching me fail at this. He was quiet for a second, then he said, "You haven't failed at one single session since you started." I dropped a dumbbell on my foot. "That's not failing, that's Tuesday." I actually laughed at that, real laugh, not the polite one. And he smiled like he'd won something. That was the night things shifted, even though nothing happened. I want to be clear, nothing happened that night. We just talked in the doorway for maybe 10 more minutes with the cold air coming in and neither of us doing anything about it, and then I left and I sat in my car for a full 2 minutes before I turned the key, just breathing, feeling like something had cracked open a little, and I didn't know what to do with the light coming through. 2 weeks after that, he offered the private session. He brought it up almost apologetically, like he was worried I'd say no. Said the schedule had gotten weird with a new hire needing his usual slot, and he could either bump me to a random trainer I'd never met or do my session after closing on a Thursday, just the two of us, if I was comfortable with that. I said yes so fast I probably should have been embarrassed about it. I told myself driving there that this was normal. Trainers do after-hours sessions. It's not a date, it's a scheduling accommodation. I repeated that in my head at every red light like it was a mantra that would make it true. It did not feel like a scheduled accommodation. The gym at 8:45 p.m. with the main lights dimmed to the after-hours setting and nobody else in the building is a completely different place. Quieter in a way that makes you very aware of your own breathing. He'd already turned the music off, which he never did, and when I asked why he said, "Didn't feel right blasting it with just us," and then looked like he wished he hadn't said that out loud. We did the session, squats, some upper body, the usual, but it was different, slower somehow, like neither of us wanted it to end, though I don't think either of us would have admitted that at the time. At one point, he was helping me correct my deadlift form, hands on my hips to square them, and he went quiet for a beat too long. And I turned my head slightly and he was closer than a trainer needs to be, and neither of us moved for maybe 2 full seconds, which doesn't sound like much until you've lived inside 2 seconds like that. Then his phone buzzed with his niece's ringtone and the whole moment just evaporated. He stepped back so fast he nearly tripped over a kettlebell. Answered it, said something about tucking her in later, hung up, wouldn't quite meet my eyes for the rest of the session. We finished at 9:40. He walked me out same as always, but the silence in that walk felt loud. At the door I did something I don't usually do, I just said it. "Was that weird back there with the hips thing?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know, was it?" "I don't know either, that's why I'm asking you." He let out this breath, almost a laugh but not quite, and said, "Caleb, I could lose my job for this." Which wasn't a no, I want you to notice that, it wasn't a no. "For what?" I said, "correcting someone's deadlift." "You know what I meant." I did know what he meant. And honestly, hearing him say it out loud, even wrapped in a warning, did something to my chest that I hadn't expected because it meant I hadn't been imagining it. 6 weeks of studying his face for clues and there it was, just handed to me, sitting in the doorway between us like something neither of us knew how to pick up. "So don't correct my deadlift anymore," I said, trying to keep it light because I didn't know what else to do with my hands or my face. Problem solved. He smiled, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to stop." I didn't have a joke for that one. I just stood there in the cold doorway air and he looked like he regretted saying it the second it left his mouth, and I said, "Theo," and he said, "Don't. Please don't say anything, I need to think." And he actually stepped back inside and pulled the door mostly shut, gentle about it but firm, and I stood on the sidewalk for a second feeling like I'd been handed something precious, and then had it taken back before I could even hold it properly. I didn't hear from him for 11 days. I counted, I'm not proud of counting, but I counted. He canceled my next 2 sessions by text, generic stuff about being short-staffed, and I let him because what else was I supposed to do, show up and demand an explanation from a man at his job? I went back to the laminated card mentality. Told myself I'd read too much into a tired man's slip of the tongue after a long shift. Told Priya it was fine. She did not believe me. I did not believe me either. On day 11 he texted, "Can we talk, not about the gym?" I almost didn't answer right away, which was petty of me, but honestly I think I just needed a minute to remember how to breathe normally before typing anything back. We met at a diner 2 towns over, his choice, and I understood why without him having to explain it. Somewhere neither of us would run into a client or a coworker. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen on him before, like he hadn't been sleeping great, and some small mean part of me was almost glad, because at least it meant I hadn't been the only one carrying this around for 11 days. "I need to tell you some stuff," he said before I'd even fully sat down. "And I need you to let me get through it without saying anything, because if you say something I like, I'm gonna lose my nerve." Okay. I came out when I was 19. Bad timing, bad family, it went about how you'd expect. I moved here for a fresh start and I built this whole thing, the job, the reputation, being the guy everyone trusts to help them, the reliable one, and somewhere in there I think I convinced myself that being careful was the same thing as being safe. Like if I never let anything actually matter to me, nothing could take it away again. The waitress came by, he waved her off without looking at her. "And then you dropped a dumbbell on your foot," he said and almost smiled, "and made this awful noise, and I don't know, something about you weren't performing for anyone. You were just there being kind of a mess, and I liked that so much it scared me." Every session after that I kept telling myself I was being professional, and I kept finding reasons to talk to you longer than I needed to. "Theo." I said, "Don't." "Sorry." He rubbed his eyes. "The hips thing, in the gym. I've replayed that probably 400 times, and every time the part that scares me isn't that I wanted to close that gap. It's how badly I wanted to, like it wasn't even a decision, it was just gravity. And that terrified me because gravity doesn't ask if it's allowed to happen, and I've spent 8 years making sure nothing happens to me without my permission." I didn't say anything. He'd asked me not to, and honestly I didn't trust my own voice yet. "I'm not saying this well," he said. "I had it better in my head." "You're saying it fine. I told you not to talk." Yeah. That wasn't liking something, that was just facts. He laughed, finally, that real short laugh, and something in his shoulders came down about an inch. "I don't know how to do this without it being messy," he said. "The gym, your membership, if it doesn't work out, I don't know how to hand you a version of this that's safe." "I didn't ask for safety," I said. "I asked for you to correct my deadlift and mean something extra by it. That's all I've been asking for since December." He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of long moment where you can see someone actually deciding something behind their eyes, and then he reached across the table, not dramatic, just his hand landing over mine, warm and a little rough from gym chalk, and said, "I'm gonna transfer you to another trainer. Not because I don't want to see you, because I want to see you and not have it be complicated by a paycheck." Okay. That's it, okay. I've been rehearsing arguments against every version of you saying no for 11 days. I didn't prepare one for you saying yes, weird. He laughed again, and this time it didn't stop after one beat, it kept going, and I realized I hadn't heard him laugh like that the whole time I'd known him, not really, not without something careful still sitting behind it. The transfer took 2 weeks to process, because gyms are bureaucratic about everything except the stuff that actually matters. In the meantime, we didn't do anything you'd call a date, not technically. We just kept finding reasons to be in the same diner, the same parking lot after his shift, the same 15 minutes on the phone before either of us fell asleep. It built slow on purpose, like we were both trying to prove to each other and ourselves that this wasn't gravity pulling us somewhere reckless. It was something we were actually choosing, every single time, with our eyes open. The first time he kissed me was not at the gym. It was in his car in the diner parking lot, 3 weeks after that conversation, engine off, both of us still in our jackets because it was February and freezing, and he did this thing where he actually asked out loud, "Can I?" Which I will remember for the rest of my life because nobody had ever asked me that before, like the answer genuinely mattered to them. I said yes so fast it was almost the same word as his question. It wasn't cinematic. His nose bumped mine wrong the first second and I laughed into it, and he pulled back looking wounded for half a beat before I grabbed his jacket and pulled him right back. And then it was fine, it was more than fine. It was the kind of kiss that makes you understand why people write songs about the stupidest, smallest things, a parking lot, a cold windshield, someone's thumb against your jaw like you're something worth being careful with. It's been 8 months now? He's not my trainer anymore. Some woman named Priyanka trains me now, coincidentally almost the same name as my friend Priya, which we both find funnier than it probably is. Theo still works at Ironclad. I still go at 8 p.m., except now it's not because of the blinds. It's because that's when his shift ends and he walks me to my car instead of just the door, and some nights we don't say much of anything. We just walk out into the cold together like it's the most normal thing in the world, which by now, honestly, it is. I think about that 11 days a lot. How close it came to just being nothing, a slipped sentence in a doorway, a man closing a door gently but firmly, a membership I could have quietly let lapse. I think about how easy it would have been for both of us to decide that careful was safer than real. I'm glad neither of us did. I'm glad gravity won, even though it scared him. Especially because it scared him, honestly, because that's how I knew it was actually something, and not just something he was performing for a client who dropped a dumbbell on his foot and made an awful noise on a random Tuesday in October. Some nights when he's locking up and I'm waiting by my car in the cold, I still think about how none of this would have happened if I hadn't been so scared of being watched. Funny how that works. I spent 6 years hiding from being seen, and it turned out being seen, really seen, by exactly one person who meant it was the thing I needed the whole time.